You are fucking with me, Gloria said. Not at all, I replied. Horace, the target is right there. We have to take him out. You'll explain the litany after. The leader may not be challenged in times of war. Now get off your ass. I disagreed. I wanted to question him. I didn't want to lose the leads he might have had in identifying his packmates, but who was I to go against the words of Gaia? So we went back. This time we went together, all of us. Gloria didn't have the patience to be careful anymore. Firehound still went in first, as originally planned. He slipped in one jump through the open window, landing gracefully and silently on the other side as if he'd just padded over. If something happened, he'd be vulnerable in this form, his natural birth form, but he'd also be at his most agile. He played to his strengths and kept the form. Since the wolf didn't immediately die getting in, or was ambushed after 3 seconds, we figured it was good enough. Gloria went in second, shifting to Hamid to help squeeze in. Now Gloria is a big girl. She also has pretty much perfect control of every single muscle in her body in any of her forms. She was able to gracefully cross over in relative silence too. On the other hand, she has no power over how loudly a floor would struggle under her weight, so she stayed in Hamid while dropping on all fours to spread her weight. She could afford to keep this relatively weaker form. As a Garou born, it wasn't a natural form for her, which meant she could shake off attacks that would have crippled me in Hamid. Besides, she could scarcely shapeshift now that she was inside. Shapeshifting hurts, and it's sudden. It's stupid hard to do that without some sound. Which left me and Jane. I settled on Glabro. It would be a decent compromise in terms of protection, at least while stealth was our preferred approach. He wouldn't make me that much heavier. Jane followed after me in the same shape. She must have been less subtle than we thought, because Jane barely had a leg over the threshold before a voice came from the next room, presumably Evan's. "Hey, fuckwit!" he shouted angrily. "We've been over this! Use the fucking door!" The doorknob started twisting, and all of our collective hearts stopped as it gradually opened. Firehound in Lupus, trying to look casual. Gloria spread on all four on the floor. Jane precariously unbalanced as she tried to shift her weight to the one leg she'd managed to get inside, and me holding her steady. Now, I know we were here to kill this guy, but I'll always maintain Gloria mostly charged out of embarrassment, so Evan would never be able to tell the tale. Which means, now that I mentioned it, she's going to kill me in my sleep tonight. Moving on quickly, hope she forgets, we slid from the cramped room we'd all been squeezed in to the much more sizable main room. It clearly served as a living room, a bedroom, a kitchen, and a dining room all in one. To our left, in the back, was a dirty, smelly sofa, in front of a cathodic TV hooked to some gaming console, whichever one was popular back in the early 2000s. To our right was a table set for one, dirty dishes piled a foot high next to pizza boxes piled even higher. Some of them smelled like they'd been there since the Cold War. On the opposite side of the room from us, still on the right, was a row of kitchen cupboards and no drawers. How cheap does an apartment need to get to have no fucking drawers? Instead, there was a tray for utensils right on the counter next to the sink. It was in such a state of disrepair that I half expected it to just up and leave, claiming it was moving somewhere nicer and cleaner, like Malpheus. Next to the oven, where a full-fledged fridge should have been, was a mini-fridge. You know, one of those cube thingies for drinks and such. And on the left was the one part of the apartment that wasn't a mess. It was a glorious desk with no less than 5 monitors hooked to what I assumed to be a state-of-the-art computer and 2 or 3 laptops. So the first thing to die was the door. Evan was quick, and normally Gloria was quicker, but she was used to being on 4 paws in Krynos, Ispo, or Lupus. Forms properly balanced for it, so she didn't quite explode into motion as fast as she'd wanted. Not that a flimsy thing like a door would stop most arrows. They burst into the room, hinges flying. The next thing that died was the TV, as Evan, the door, and then Gloria landed on it hard. The table beneath it was immediately next. I say table generously, as it was in fact one of those plastic milk boxes. Somewhere in the middle of those 2 seconds, between the moment the door cracked open and the moment they hit the floor, they'd both shifted glabro. 'Cause here's the kicker. We're pretty careful not to alert humans that werewolves exist, but so are black spiral dancers. It wouldn't do to have Krynos snarl and growl and in a shitty apartment where anyone next door would hear the whole thing as if they were in the room with us. And that limited Evan's options. A little. 'Cause shifting both his arms was fair game. Partial transformations were hard, but they were possible. Alone against 4 Garou, I figure he was desperate enough. All Gloria could see with the door between them were huge Krynos claws digging into the wood and pushing her up several feet above the ground while he rolled to his side, into his feet, by the kitchen table. As Gloria landed over the door on the soft fabric of the sofa, her right knee and her left hand punched through the wood. While she untangled herself, our next best fighter was up. Firehound leaped for his throat. Heaven dodged, barely, and the several hundred pounds of wolf landed on the next piece of furniture to die, the kitchen table. Or 4-legged one might have held, but this one had only one central leg, so Firehound received a face full of floor. The side of the table connected with the hard floor surface with enough force that the middle leg snapped free, sailing a few feet across the room, bursting through the counter section below the sink, knocking a water pipe loose. Victims 4 and 5 respectively. Evan turned on his heel and made for the exit door. Aha! Speed! That's my cue. A cheetah spirit once told me a nice little trick to run twice as fast. I got to the door before him and leaned my back into it. I could have attacked, but sooner or later my packmates would stop killing the furniture and start killing him, so I really figured it was more important to make absolutely sure he could not escape, which is when a Krynos ran her claws across his back in a loud bellow. On the upside, the dogs next door stopped barking. On the downside, a lot of humans would have heard that. We would have had some cover-up to do. I looked at Jane with a crossed expression which stopped her in her tracks from landing what might have otherwise been a killing blow. I couldn't really blame the kid for efficiency. She was the only one trying to kill something that was alive to begin with, but Evan didn't wait. He slid under James' massive frame and ran for the windows next to Gloria, leaving a thick trail of blood in his wake, but he didn't pass through the windows. He passed through the gauntlet. Motherfucker had made 2 stupid gambles in this fight, and I won them both. Sure, it's possible to do partial transformation, but I wouldn't rely on it in a fight. Sure, it's possible to cross instantly into the Umbra, but I wouldn't rely on that in a fight either. Evan did, and Evan made it work. Lucky bastard. Firehound could let us cross, but Jane wasn't in the pack, couldn't be until she went through her rite of passage. She'd have to cross on her own, and that was too risky. She wasn't trained for it, and her connection to her noses wasn't yet strong enough. Stay! Get leads! I yelled as I ran after Firehound, grabbing his tail mid-leap, just as Gloria had grabbed onto my leg. For future reference, if you're ever stuck inside a door you aren't attuned to, try crossing into the Umbra. If you manage to cross, the door will conveniently find itself unable to cross into another layer of reality with you. It will, however, slam into the glass and destroy the reflective surfaces that might have been a useful way back. We managed to cross relatively quickly, but Evan had a significant lead. The windows had been 1 floor up, so our first fight on the other side was against gravity. Gravity won. We fell, but on this side of the gauntlet we were free to shift to Krynos, so we did. The damage was negligible and would dissipate within seconds. The second fight was with a pair of psychomanchiae Evan had seemingly left there to wait for us. As I lay on my back groaning, I saw the creature try to stomp my face into paste. Quick thinking from Gloria saved me from an untimely death. She grabbed my ankle and snapped my entire body, my entire Krynos body, unceremoniously across the pavement next to her. I'm sure I heard something in her shoulder pop, but if it hurt, she didn't show. "We got this," she yelled. "You're faster! Kill him!" She turned to one of the monsters, Firehound to the other. They could not take them on, but they could stop them from coming after me. I did not have time to think. I did not have time to argue. The leader may not be challenged in times of war. I went, unsure if I would ever see my packmates again. But that's the name of the game. Another fucking day at the office. I ran twice as fast as I should have been able to. Now, I'm not the tracker in the team, but it doesn't get any easier than following a near-continuous stream of blood. I caught up to him a minute and a half later. I never slowed down. I just punched him in the spine. He never saw it coming. He didn't try to dodge. He thought he was in a clear. He bent over on the wrong side, crashing down hard on the grass, barreling a few times, screaming in pain, in rage, in confusion. His legs limped uselessly, but he tried to turn towards me with his arms, but I was already back behind him again, too fast for him to comprehend. Before he could figure out where I'd gone, my jaws closed shut on his neck. I tried to pull back, rip off a large chunk, but he grabbed my head with one hand to hold me in place. With his other hand, he clawed my face, ripping my lips and popping one of my eyes. But the pain just made me angrier, urging me to pull even harder. I grabbed both his hands with mine, put my foot down on his back, and yanked the whole thing free. He died with a gurgle as I howled triumphantly. I made my way to my packmates, but they were gone. There was blood, too much blood, and I didn't want to think about the implications. A cursory inspection didn't reveal any bodies, but it did reveal that the two Banes, the two very dangerous Banes, were close. I didn't push my luck and made for the one spot I knew they would all make for if we were separated. The same spot we'd gathered when Jane had had her first change, not far from the cairn. When I got there, Jane was already waiting. A stolen bike lay abandoned on the ground nearby. On my approach, she shifted Krynos, ready to defend herself. "Whoa there," I said. "I come in peace." Although my being covered in Evan's blood probably wouldn't have convinced anybody else. "Thank God, Horace," she said, hugging me instead of striking me. In Krynos, it might have been more accurate to say she was crushing me, but I was glad to see she'd made it safely too, and I didn't care. "Where are the others?" "No idea," I answered. "There was an ambush on the other side. We had to split." No, she began, but I shushed her. Hey, it's okay. We'll wait for them here. Firehound is as sneaky as it gets, and death itself couldn't take Gloria. Let's give him a minute, okay?" That lifted the tension a little. "She is pretty damn tough, isn't she?" she agreed. "Toughest I know." We stood there awkwardly in silence, looking at the darkness of the woods, hoping to see something move, hoping to see the right things move. Nothing did. Not for a long time. In truth, it was probably just a couple of minutes, but when you don't know if the people you care about are alive, 5 minutes is the longest time ever. Eventually, a white shape limped out of the darkness. Firehound's left hind leg was such a sheer, mangled mess that he couldn't use it. He had puncture wounds over the entire left side of his body. no doubt as a result of all the needles, scalpels, wine openers, and other sharp or pokey-type implements lining the bodies of the psychomachiae he'd been fighting. He should have healed by now. He hadn't. It didn't look too good, but he was alive. Thank Gaia he was alive. Lumping down next to us, he got to licking his wounds. "You okay, buddy?" Jane asked. "I live, and the mother will see to it that I am healed, in time." His gaze turned to me. "The prey? The father will not see him healed," I replied. "Good," he said, turning back to his wounds. He focused on his healing, but I saw his ears twitch. I saw him lift his nose as every whiff of the wind. He hid his concern, but his attention was on the woods around us, listening for Gloria's return, or lack thereof. After an agonizing silence, punctuated only by the regular sound of the wolf's tongue lashing, Jane couldn't stand it anymore. "So, about that litany." At first I couldn't believe she was asking for yet another lesson, but I saw her body language too. She was almost shaking with stress, her eyes bloodshot, veins pulsing. She was out of her mind, worried and verging on frenzy. This was a sorely needed distraction. "All right, let's do this. Sit down. This one's going to be a while," I said. "Nope, no can do, not gonna happen," she replied, as she resumed pacing, trying to focus on me. It was distracting as hell, but I gave her a pass. "Okay. The litany is a set of rules all members of the Garou nation live by. Technically, you aren't a member until your rite of passage. Technically, you are exempt from following them, but make no mistake, breaking some of these have very real consequences and will get you in trouble either way, member or not." "Peachy," she said. "I can tell this one is going to be a lot, too." "Oh yeah," I continued. "Anyone who fails to follow these rules will likely be challenged for it at the next moot's cracking of the bone, presided by the Master of Challenge, or will be investigated, trial, judged, and sentenced for it at the next moot's cracking of the bone by the Truth Catcher. Depending on the nature and severity of the infraction, if they lose the challenge or are found guilty, they'll likely be subjected to one of many, 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 many punishment rites, ranging from the merely shameful to the absurdly deadly. One of them implies running through dense vegetation where every single leaf is a sharp silver blade." She stopped pacing and looked at me horrified. She turned a little white. At least her mind was now on sharp silver leaf blades and not on Gloria's possible life deficiency. "That's insane," she accused. "I mean, granted we don't bring this one out very often," I conceded. "Straight up barbaric," she continued. "Are you sure we're the good guys?" I admit I didn't know what to reply to that. "It's hard to defend, I see your point," I ended up saying. "We're a very, very old society. In many ways, some of what we do seems horrible to modern sensibilities. Are horrible, really. I can't argue against that. And the we're at war argument can only take you so far. All I can say is that sometimes a Philodox needs to give an example because some crimes are so bad they cannot be repeated again, ever. Say we find a traitor in our midst whose vile plot has murdered Garou and kin in an attempt to corrupt a Karen into a hive. Such a rite would likely give second thoughts to any other mole we haven't found yet." She gave me a look. "Or," she countered, "convince them that we're the bad guys and need to finish the job." Our enemies serve distraction and corruption itself," I continued. "We may straddle the line of righteousness, but there can be no doubt that they have well and truly crossed it. It is good to question our ways. It's healthy and allows us to avoid being stagnant, something we definitely can be accused of having done for too long, but existence itself hangs in the balance. There are no higher stakes, and there can be no doubt who, between us and them, are the good guys. That may seem hard to believe, but Remember, right now, we're fighting to stop a scheme to turn high schoolers into murderous supernatural movie-like slashers. And what are our enemies doing? All right, turning high schoolers into murderous supernatural movie-like slashers. We are not the same, even if some of our methods are quite barbaric. I reserve judgment, she said, but I could see I had made my point. On the other hand, some of our punishment rites are hilarious. One of them is called Voice of the Jackal and makes someone speak in just the most shrill and annoying voice ever for a while. Honestly, it's more of a punishment for anyone else who have to hear it. She chuckled at that. Good. Her mind was away from death and silver blades. Anyway, I continued, the heart of the matter is these laws were laid down by Gaia. None of us are really keen on arguing with her on the validity of those rules, which means, of course, that we spend a ridiculous amount of time arguing on interpreting them. I mean, that's the job of the philodox. Take, for example, the first tenet of the Litany. Its wording seems pretty clear, and it sounds like it doesn't leave room for any interpretation. You should already be familiar with this one. Garou shall not mate with Garou. It sounds horrible on the surface. That results in Garou-borns, right? Jane asked. Almost consistently. We're nothing if not fertile, and two Garou together will more often than not result in an offspring. And that offspring, if it happens, is guaranteed to be Garou-born. There is an innate incompatibility in the spiritual side of our natures that just results in something unnatural. Now that may seem harsh in light of the wonderful individuals we know and love, like Gloria, Vivid Keen, and Dreadhorn, who are the results of such pairings. They are all amazing people whom I am glad exists, but the worm touched them in the womb and twisted them in some ways that aren't meant to be. And yet we don't agree on how to handle it. Some believe the sin belongs only to the parents. Some believe the child bears the sin within their very flesh and soul. I hear some folks believe it's fine to bone as long as you're careful and use protection. But some still argue that the spirit of the law doesn't even have anything to do with Garou-born at all. That Gaia, in her wisdom, knew we would get lost in the war if we didn't have a reminder of what we were fighting for. If the Garou mixed only with Garou and cared only for Garou, it would be easy to lose sight of both humanity and our place in the natural balance. We would become monsters, consumed only by rage and battle. She made this law so that we would have kin among wolves and humans, so that we would love them and care for them. She did sit down now, thinking. You're right. There is a lot of space to argue, even if it seems straightforward. Humans have a set of laws from a deity too, at least some do. It says, "Thou shalt not kill," and yet even that is apparently extremely open to debate. We fought wars in the name of that very same God who clearly told us we should never kill. Some of the church was apparently cool with it. I was not about to start arguing religion, and there were many tenets to go, so I nodded understanding and moved on. Combat the worm wherever it dwells and whenever it breeds. Means pretty much exactly what it says. The worm is to be fought anytime, anywhere. We don't give quarters, we don't stop to think. What if we free him instead? We fight it, period. Some take it to mean that at all costs, others are more practical about it. For example, ideally, you'd want to do it without breaking any other tenets in the process. Most of us consider this tenet still gives us the necessary leeway not to be complete idiots over it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't think things through first or can't fall back strategically. Just that we don't give the worm a free pass. Say one of your friends turns out to be an infiltrated black spiral dancer. When you find out, you take them out. You don't let them go back to their hives. Gaia knows what horrible acts they will perform if you let them go. And those acts will be on you because you could have stopped it. Still, I hear the Stargazers don't follow this whole party line as much. I don't understand the whole notion, but they maintain that the worm should be freed, that the real enemy is the Weaver. Something about we're all one and really don't exist or something. I don't know. You'd have to ask them about it. Respect the territory of another, or as humans say, when in Rome. If you're a guest to another sept, you should be a good guest. It's their home. Of course, then you have to get Fenris who are known to invade other septs, and they what now? She interrupted. Yeah, there's a lot of tension over that. In their minds, they're actually respecting the territory itself. If they're able to take over, then the territory wasn't properly defended. They see it as calling the weak, so the some is stronger. It's a whole damn thing. Next, we have accept an honorable surrender, which is a fancy way of saying don't kill each other during challenges. Once the other one yields, you stop. You won. In theory, that applies in combat too, but then again, we mostly fight minions of the worm, and there's that little combat the worm tenet that just makes a lot of us fairly confused on the notion of whether or not we're supposed to let a Famurai or a Black Spiral Dancer live if they surrender honorably. Then again, operative word is honorable. If the enemy is pure evil, can they really be honorable? Edith wasn't pure evil, Jane said. Ah, correct. And we let her live, didn't we? Didn't even need to surrender. We made a judgment call that she wasn't of the worm. Not yet. The Bane, we combated the worm wherever it dwelled the fuck out of, but Edith deserved a chance. But there are some who wouldn't have bothered unless she had actually honorably surrendered. That's a lot. That's so much, she said. Submission to those of higher station is next, which is why elders are used to be obeyed. Early on, I warned you, they would expect you to fall in line. It's why we don't usually argue with Sarah on spiritual or ritual things. She's higher ranked, and she's the master of the Rite. She knows better than we, and we trust her. That's stupid. She can still be wrong, Jane interjected. Yes, she can, Gloria replied suddenly from the darkness, making both me and Jane startled out of our skins. Firehound just chuckled. Bastard could have warned us. You're okay, Jane basically screamed as she ran up to her. I wouldn't say that. The Around grunted back as she found a place to sit down on the ground. Her pelt was red, with only a few patches of white left. I hate those Banes. I really do. I'll be fine in a few days. Don't mind me. Keep going. I saw tears run down Jane's cheeks as she hugged humongous Krynos. Gloria still wasn't used to that. She froze up. Part of that must have been the pain, to be honest, but she let it happen and eased into it eventually. She must have wanted something to focus on other than the pain, so Gloria eventually resumed the lesson as Jane settled on the ground next to her like nothing had happened. Except it did. We all exchanged glances that said what we really wanted to say, what we really thought. We may have been talking about the Litany, but we could have been talking about anything at all. Our eyes were really saying how much we cared for each other and how happy we were to all be alive in this spot, our spot, together. There were more than a few silent tears. See, Jane, Gloria picked up. Suncaller isn't perfect. She can make the wrong call. The Litany allows for that. There's another one that says, respect those beneath ye. All are of Gaia. It means while we must fall in line, they must also listen to us. At least listen. That's right, I chimed in. We all have a voice, but once someone with a station says something, they make the calls, and we follow through. They are expected to measure our opinions with their wealth of experience and knowledge before making that call. Most of the time, we don't even need to. Garou, who survived long enough to become Warder or Wormfoe, Truthcatcher, Sept Leader, Master of the Rite, Master of Challenge, they did so because they were good. That is not what this tenet is about, added Firehound next to me, startling me. I swear, he wasn't even trying to be stealthy. I fucking knew he was there, and I still jumped. I don't know how he does it. Right, I conceded. Well, kinda. See, the wording is super vague, so there's more than one way to take this tenet. Another reading is that it refers to other creatures. meaning animals, plants, spirits, and such. It doesn't matter if they're smaller, dumber, weaker, or whatnot. They are all of Gaia, and as such, they all deserve respect. Just because we are Garou, Gaia's chosen warriors, doesn't give us the right to lord over all other living things and dismiss them as irrelevant. Although, boy did we screw that one up a few times in our history. Following up is first share of the kill to the highest in station. This is basically wolf logic. You know how in a pack, how the dominant wolves get to eat all the best parts of a kill, and then the rest of the pack eats in order of importance. That seems harsh, but it's really about survival. The best and stronger needs to eat the part that will keep them the best and strongest. It's about being fair, or unfair. I mean, it's about staying combat ready. If the pack's best fighter gets routed by another pack's better fed best fighter, the pack is going to lose territory, prime feeding ground, and may very well die off. We apply that logic to other things too. Mostly things like weapons and fetishes, which are objects with spirits bound into them. It gives them powerful magical properties. If our best warriors have the best equipment, then they get to do the most good with them. Overall, we get to win more fights. Whatever they don't need gets passed down the chain. Next, we got one that should go without saying, but here goes. Ye shall not eat the flesh of humans. I paused for impact. I'm a jerk like that. I just let that hang for way too long. Sometimes, I'm just straight up evil. Letting her puzzle out why that was even a thing. At first, she nodded, agreeing that it should go without saying. Then when I didn't speak, she became thoughtful. If it goes without saying, why are we saying it? She looked at me. Decided I wouldn't be the style to eat anyone, then she looked less certainly at Firehound and seemed to turn queasy as she glanced at Gloria. Surely they wouldn't eat people. But then again, they weren't human. Technically, neither were Jane and I, but we'd been born amongst humans. We identified somewhat as connected, human adjacent, if you will. Gloria flashed her teeth, playing along, laughing at Jane's reaction. Relax, cub, she said finally, ending her torment. I don't eat people. It's against the Litany, she added after a pause. I chuckled and let her off the hook. No one does, don't worry. Outside of some weird rumors, it's not a thing. Not from Hamid's, Lupus, or Garou borns. Remember, Gaia gave us these tenets a redunculously long time ago, and we still follow them. They're all relevant, but some might not be relevant right now. It's not that difficult to imagine a time of brutality centuries or millennia ago when it might have been a thing. The Impergium, to name only one. The what now? She asked. God. Yeah, okay, I need to cover that in detail at some point, but for now, know that there was a time when Garou herded humans. It was a bad time in our history. Long prehistory, short. I bet that particular tenet of the Litany saw more use then. Point is, don't do it. Gaia said no, and on the off chance that you'd ever want to, there's a good incentive not to. I'm not going to do that, she interjected. Nevertheless, for the sake of your education, know that it's a bad idea. It's relatively well known that doing it is a one-way ticket to Worm Taint Town. I don't know if it's by Gaia's decree, or if humans are just that far gone, or if that's because they ingest too many weird chemicals and microplastic or whatever, but don't do it. It will taint you, and in time corrupt you. Don't eat my annoying neighbor, she joked. Got it. I'll change my weekend plans. No biggie. Let's move on. Happily, I agreed. The veil shall not be lifted. You know this one. We can't let humans know we exist or they would wipe us out. Some time ago, humans started an inquisition and started going after all the supernaturals. They were surprisingly efficient at it. Enough to scare the living hell out of pretty much every supernatural group out there. This, I said, gesturing at all of us. None of this used to be secret. There used to be vampire lords openly ruling over town Dracula style. Magic libraries, haunted houses, and every manner of supernaturals mingling with humanity. Some, like us, helped them. Some, like vampires, preyed on them. But none of them bothered to hide. What were humans going to do? Well, a hell of a lot, turns out, once they got pissed enough. Everyone went into hiding, hoping the humans would forget. And luckily, they did. With enough time, they began thinking of us as myths, legends, scary stories, or even clever moral metaphors. But no, we were there. We still are. And we don't want a second Inquisition. No one does. That would be very bad. So we're careful not to be seen. We don't shapeshift in public. We try to leave no traces that can't be explained by a really large bear or some other silly things humans come up with that are more convenient to believe than werewolves and monsters. We plant false evidence. We manipulate the media. We ask a favor to powerful people. We do what needs to be done to hide us and any of our indiscretions. And when all else fails, yes, we sometimes kill. If there's just no way around it, if someone we can't trust saw too much or knows too much, it may come to that. Well, that's way too harsh, she said. No, Gloria butted in before I could reply. I mean, yes, but it's a matter of the survival for our entire race. She's right, I confirmed. Vampires, ghosts, werewolves, fairies, and whatever else, they don't all scare easily. If we all agreed humans were a very real danger to our collective survival, it was. And they're much more powerful now than they were then. We might kill one human for our survival, but they would kill all of us. And then who's going to stop the worm? If it comes to it, it's one life to save the world. I don't like it, she said, climbing up. Good, I agreed. You shouldn't like it. If you liked it, if you were apathetic to it, you'd be well on your way to joining the worm and we'd be having a very different conversation. Don't like it. Hate it. That's the right attitude. Okay. What else is there? She asked, losing patience. Do not suffer thy people to tend thy sickness, I answered. That one's harsh. Also probably the most ignored tenet. In theory, this means you shouldn't make yourself a weight on others. Toughen up. In practice, it's often interpreted as don't make others endanger themselves to save you. There's some wisdom to that. Like tonight, we all split up. We all had a job to do. We all pulled our weight and then regrouped here. We trusted each other to handle ourselves and make it back. We didn't needlessly put anyone else's lives in danger or dove back into the middle of a psychomachy-infested umbrelscape on the off chance someone might have gotten turned around. There's no point losing 4 warriors when you can lose only 1. That's how most of us applied this one anyway. Although there are some, usually Fenrir, who go much further and expect folks to deal with their own things. Physical, emotions, everything. To those folk, we shouldn't even help each other. But if that was the intent, I don't think the spirits would teach us gifts that let us heal each other. Thurges like you have access to many healing gifts. Those are useful when a fight goes wrong, to keep the warriors in fighting shape. Not healing them is just dumb. Most of us know this and will always be there to offer aid. I'll do the next 2 together. The later may be challenged at any time during peace, and the leader may not be challenged during wartime. When shit hits the fan isn't a time to argue. That's why I stopped earlier and fell into line. Later than I should have, I'm not perfect, but Gloria was in charge, she said go, and we were on enemy grounds. It's okay to raise points, but any plan is better than no plan when the time to act is now. Remembering this will save your life. If you have a problem with the leader, you challenge after, not on the field. You bring it up in the cracking of the bone, and you let the spirits judge who's right and who's wrong in a fair challenge. Now, I should point out that some people use the definition of war rather liberally. Some argue we're always at war with the worm. That's just silly to me, but I'm not a philodox. I leave it to them to argue semantics. Oof, that was so many rules. Glad that's over, she said, getting up and ready to head back home. Ye shall take no action that causes a Karen to be violated, I said. Oh my God, how many are there? She exclaimed, sitting back down beside the huge Krynos. It's the last one, and the most important one. You've been inside a Karen. You've felt the embrace of the mother while inside the bond. I don't believe I'll need to explain this one very much. You know now. Karens are important. Karens are sacred. We do not mess around with that. Those whose actions lead us to losing a Karen, or a Karen being corrupted, are in for a terrible, terrible time. Death is usually the traitor's reward. She looked at me and said, God, I knew this was going to be a lot. Okay, thank you and peace out. She got up, nodded goodbye, took one last look at Gloria as if to make sure she was really back safe and alive, then left. The rest of the pack stayed right where we were, taking in the joy of having survived. Our relaxation was interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. Gloria got up, ready for a fight. Oh my God, screamed Jane. I totally forgot to tell you guys. I have the laptop. This has been A Rite to Remember, Season 2, Episode 14, a series of lore videos for Legacy Werewolf the Apocalypse presented through an immersive narrative. This week, I don't have a lot to say that I haven't said above. About ye shall not eat the flesh of humans, I should mention that cannibalism comes back a couple of times in Werewolf. It's one of the effects of the thrall of the worm, some less than sensitive outtakes on some of the tribes and their patrons go into it, and there's a story that doesn't bear mentioning in the Bone Gnawer tribe book. It's a thing for some reason. And often it's really just there to be there, with little to no point to it. Like, it makes sense for red talon hunting humans, or a Garou born abandoned at birth who'd always lived alone in forest. They might eat a human or two should they stumble upon its territory. You can use that for narrative and or horrific effect, but it doesn't really make sense much of anywhere else. Especially not with Bone Gnawers, who somehow have this one story that, again, I won't talk about, because they literally have a gift allowing them to eat trash. They can eat anything, at all times. Thankfully, it's very rarely mentioned, but it is there, so content warning, I guess. Other than that, remember the point of the Litany is to generate roleplay. It's designed to be open-ended and endlessly arguable, because it is supposed to be. Judging people's transgression, culpability, and punishment is half the Philodoc's job after all. I hope I was able to give you enough of an understanding of the basics to get going. If not, Core Book might give you a little more, and if you want to dig even more, then all of the tribe books go over them from the perspective of each tribes. One last bit. W5 ditches two tenets of the Litany. First, Garou shall not mate with Garou is gone. According to interviews, White Wolf's position is that the Garou have more important business than policing other people's sexuality. I embrace this position. I don't want anyone in a LARP or around the table to have to deal with their characters being judged for who they love. That might hit too close to home. Ditching this tenet makes sense. People should feel safe playing Werewolf the Apocalypse. My issue with this move is that the decision was made to ditch the baby with the bathwater and also get rid of the Garou born. While the two are intertwined, they are not inseparable. Just detach them. Whenever discussing the removal of the breed, all explanations for the decision that I have seen tied it to this tenet, and I am not on board with this. You can absolutely still have Garou born and remove this tenet of the Litany. Did the Garou born need a solid rework? Heck yeah. but they also brought a lot to Werewolf. They were a unique brand of otherness that was neither human nor wolf, and I've seen a lot of cool concepts for Garou born over the years. Plus a lot of folks love them, identify with them even, and now they have lost that. Why? The Garou born could have been fixed. In fact, removing that tenet was one of the two things that needed to be done to get there. That, and remove folk hating them just for the sin of being born. Boom, voila, job done. But W5 didn't even try. Moreover, they have even come out saying that breed doesn't matter in W5. Be human or wolf, it's just background fluff. And that is incredibly sad because that just slashes out a huge part of the beating heart of Werewolf the Apocalypse. The other tenet that is gone is do not suffer thy people to tend thy sickness. I don't feel particularly strongly about this one. It was often ignored in play and could be very hit and miss. I don't mind it being gone, but you might. And if so, it's easy enough to bring it back. See you next episode for the Get of Fenris.